Good evening. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to the fourth episode of our webinar in Peacedays Festival. We are from Winnipeg, and a great city, a great story, and a contribution of so many people, making it a very peaceable city in the world. Today we have a special guest, Darcy Ataman, the Executive Director of Make Music Matter movement. And he is kind enough to join us to share his experience on Democratic Republic of Congo. The audience, the title of our today's webinar is Striking a Chord of Peace, Reflections on Democracy and the Democratic Republic of Congo. With this brief introduction, let me do the treaty recognition. And then I will introduce our guest reading a short bio of his. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homelands of Métis Nation. We all are united together to work in the true spirit of reconciliation. The audience, as I promised, founder and Chief Executive Officer Darcy Ataman, and who founded Make Music Matter, which has become a global movement now. And this organization is basically dedicated to bringing an alternate form of music therapy to survivors of conflict and trauma. He developed the innovative Healing in Harmony program, and in partnership with Nobel laureate Dr. Denis Mukwege, and continues to scale the innovation, which is currently running in 11 sites in 8 countries around the world. In 2019, Darcy co-founded A4A Records and Publishing with legendary producer David Bottrill, creating a groundbreaking publishing model for artists living in extreme poverty in conflict areas. As a music and video producer by trade, Darcy continues to collaborate with creatives around the world, including a continued partnership with celebrated producer and photographer Platon, The People's Portfolio. Most recently, Darcy completed the score for Platon's documentary film, My Body is Not a Weapon. Darcy graduated from University of Manitoba with Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. He has worked internationally as a music producer, collaborating with countless artists and engineers, including Shelly Yakuz, Levon Helm, and DJ Jazzy Jeff, resulting in several Juno nominations. Darcy Ataman is also Order of Manitoba, and we are so proud to have him this evening. Darcy, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. The audience, the reason we have gathered this evening today is Peacedays. And let me speak a few words about this particular event and what is going on in our city. Peacedays is a space that's been created to promote and inspire understanding, goodwill, and compassion locally, nationally, and internationally. It supports and motivates people who want a culture of peace and compassion. It encourages conversations and relationships that inspire action, commitment, and the promotion of positive peace and peace literacy. Peacedays was inspired by Rotary World Peace Partners in 2003, envisaging the idea of Canadian Museum for Human Rights as a beacon of hope for the oppressed, impoverished, and vulnerable peoples of the world. Peacedays grew out of a desire to celebrate United Nations International Day of Peace, which is September 21st. With this brief background, let me also welcome our advisor, Gary Senf, to the show. Gary, thank you very much for spending time this evening. We are really grateful because we will also listen from you, including the interaction with Darcy in the Q&A session. So that is all from my side, and I think it's time to invite our guest, Darcy Ataman, to speak about his experience on Democratic Republic of Congo. Darcy, floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I believe you want me to start with some of the sort of political landscape of Democratic Republic of Congo. And in order to set that stage, it's really important to look back as far as the 1800s. So the days of, King Leopold, who famously went and colonized, King of Belgium colonized Congo, and killed millions upon millions of Congolese for the rubber trade, and in fact that sparked the automotive industry. So you have a country that from, again, hundreds of years ago that is used to, one, being endemically traumatized and wary of outsiders. So that's the first important part. That continued on through the Cold War. So through the Cold War, obviously the Soviet Union and the US could not directly fight each other, but they propped up their pet dictators, particularly in Africa and Latin America, to fight those wars. And Congo was part of that with Mobutu for many years. Then eventually, Laurent Kabila got into power, and he was famously assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. And that was apparently, even though there's still a lot of rumor on that, in retaliation from the Kigogo tribe, who were against Rwanda. And at the time, Laurent Kabila went and met with the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. So in retaliation for that betrayal that this tribe thought, they assassinated him in his own office. At that point, his son, Joseph Kabila, took over for 18 years. And he started as a very, very young man. So I think he took power, just a little too early. And what ended up happening, and to me, this might be oversimplification, but what is occurring to this day, you have two sort of sets of pressures. You have the regional pressure, in particular, the neighbors of Rwanda and Uganda, who have their own issues with militia groups and things like that. And the conflicts go over the territories and sort of the borderlines quite regularly. So you have a lot of resentment from the Ugandan side and the Rwandan side as well. And then internationally and regionally on top of it, the biggest factor, in my opinion, that I've seen personally is the extractive industry. So the mining. So whatever we call the conflict minerals, which is a range of minerals that are all found in our cell phones, laptop computers, iPads, all that, all about 85% mined from Eastern Congo, mostly mined under duress by children. I've witnessed this many times myself. We have Make Music Matter has one particular site where we work in an area called Mulamba. And every time I go there, you have to pass the mining sector. Or to go to the local airport in Kavumu, you have to go past the mining sector. And there you will literally see 8-year-old children chained up, breaking rocks, working in the mines. But of course, a lot of vested interest. So you have the regional pressure and the international pressure that wants things corrupt, because at the end of the day, stealing is much cheaper than paying for the mineral or at face value. So Joseph Kabila took advantage of this greatly and ended up being a dictator for 18 years on that. And famously, I forget the gentleman's name, but there was a particularly, I think he was Israeli, who he would sell the mining rights to. And then whoever he would sell the mining rights to, they would give him the kickback. So he was in control of all that. And when you have 18 years of sort of feeding at the trough uncontrollably, that is very difficult to give up. But finally, after the sort of in the last election, the international community even had enough and had to force their hand to have a democratic election. So this is the first time, 5 years ago, since 1960, that Congo's had a democratic election. And at the time, there was a lot of hope. So a gentleman named Tshisekedi is currently the president of Congo. And he came in supposedly being the one, again, democratic. He's going to bring human rights and lived values back to the community. And what occurred there at first was very interesting, was that Joseph Kabila did not want to leave, of course, even though he was voted out. But for the first year, he was still in control of the army, and he had enough senators that are under his sort of payroll to, again, control the military that kept him in real power. Eventually, and there's certain names I can't mention, but certain actors from the international community did come in secretly right after a certain election down south and made it and gave him a choice and said all of those parliamentarians and senators that were loyal to Kabila, either they're going to jail right away to the ICC or they can join Tshisekedi. And that is what occurred. And then since then, up until last week, Joseph Kabila has actually been under house arrest first in Lubumbashi, which is his hometown, and now in Kinshasa. But now that they're gearing up for another election, he's been allowed to leave home. So once that power became absolute for Tshisekedi, he changed his tune as well. So, for example, he was very happy to be associated with Dr. Mukwege, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate of 2018, and was using him for his international contacts until he took full power. And then his tune completely changed. He ostracized him, and sort of that dividing line occurred. And I think just to insert an important piece, because I know we want to talk a little bit about Make Music Matter as well before we get to what's happening right now, is what we have to understand, though. You have, again, hundreds of years now where the division is getting worse and worse and worse. So there's very little middle class. You either are wealthy or living in slums, for the most part. And what Make Music Matter does with Healing and Harmony is works to heal that trauma, the PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And that may not sound politically important, but eventually when you extrapolate that across, hopefully, a country, and someone is healed and no longer traumatized, they'll regain their agency. And then hopefully as a country, that agency coalesces into a bulwark against the corruption. So that is sort of what we're doing in a long term and trying to contribute to that. Now, there is an election scheduled for December 20th coming up, and there was already talks about it being pushed back. But luckily, the international community, in particular Secretary Blinken in the U.S., put a lot of pressure to make sure it still goes on the correct timetable. And then with that, fortuitously just announced this past weekend, our partner and my friend Dr. Mukwege has announced that he's running for president as well. And I think if Kaiser, we can show those two photos I just received Saturday morning, that'd be great. And he did something quite brilliant, because I was with the doctor. I was in Congo in May, and I came back early June. So I was with him when he told me face to face in person that he plans to run for president. And what he did was he said that he's going to leave it up to the will of the people. So if the people mobilize enough, they will tell him if he should run or not. And what this did was civil society actually organized themselves, the academics, the businessmen, organized themselves and raised $100,000 US for his registration fees to run for president. So on Saturday, he accepted that, which was his sign that he is going to run, which is quite brilliant, because then already it's coming from the base. And already he does not have to dip into any corporate money. He's not beholden to anybody, but just of the people. And really fascinating, what has occurred already since then is the propaganda spin against them. So while he was announcing and making the announcement of this money is from the people, we can regain our country, we can take our country back finally, the current government was actually sending out social media messages to say that the money came from the White House, the money came from Macron in Paris. He only likes white people. He only deals with white people. And they're trying to serve disinformation already right during his announcement. So you can see the fear that President Tshisekedi has against them for running. And furthermore, Paul Kagame, the current president of Rwanda, and has been for the last 16 plus years, is quite fearful that Dr. Mukwege will become president, because he knows he's an ideologue. The good doctor's ethics are beyond reproach. He will never capitulate to anything, even if that means losing his own life. He will not do that. So Paul Kagame and Rwanda know they can no longer, with him in president, take the steps that they've been doing to steal the minerals for themselves. I mean, they take the conflict minerals, they actually illegally mine coffee and tea, and then rebrand it as Rwandan coffee and tea and sell it internationally. It's quite the spectacle to see. Now, mixed into all of this is the UN mission to Congo, which really also shows the need for, again, the country to heal and regain agency, because they are understandably suspicious of outsiders. So, for example, Make Music Matter has been working in Congo, in particular at Peacedays, since 2015. No matter where we work, our program cycle's 4 months. Every time we start a new cycle, we do what we call a community sensitization period. And that is to go with the local leaders and all the community members so they understand what this program is about. And that's the only way to fight against the leeriness of the outsider. So it's a constant thing you have to keep doing. And in particular, MONUSCO is a great example of that. So the last I checked, the budget for the UN mission for protection in Congo was 1.5 billion a year. And I've seen this countless times. It is, not to be too bold, I would say it is largely a waste of money. Because what happens in these areas is that developed countries do not put boots on the ground in these areas. So all the battalions for this UN mission to protect are made up of other developing nations who have their own problems. So you have someone coming from Sudan, you have someone coming from Pakistan, Uruguay, South Sudan, Chad. I've seen this countless times. They have their own conflict. They're there to collect the paycheck and stay out of trouble so they can send it back home to feed their own families. So it's really just it's certainly an inefficient system that way, where when it's so hand to mouth, it's easily corruptible as well. So I'll give you two quick examples. Many years ago, I was in an area, I think it's called Chimbucha. It's about 6 hours through the forest in rebel territory. We were leaving a hospital visit from there, and we see, actually, I'll give you 3 examples. We see a UN command post and some tanks. And we stop just to chat and say hi. And the commander comes out and talks to me and says, "What are you doing here? We hide at night and then count the bodies in the morning. Get out." So that is the protection that they're implementing, was when the fighting starts at night, they hide, they come back, count the bodies in the morning, send the reports. I had another incident a few years after that, also coming back through rebel territory, coming back to the city. And we stumbled upon a Rwandan rebel camp. And we were driving by it. On the right side was the rebel camp. On the left side of the road, in the middle of the forest, was a UN post headquarters there. And the rebels, because the UN just moved into this territory, wanted to demonstrate that we're not afraid of you, we're really in control of it. And they ended up lining up about a dozen villagers right in front of the doors and beheading everybody. So that just goes to show what they're up against. And again, these UN troops, for the most part, who are spending boots on the ground, they're not going to risk their own life when, again, they get a very small paycheck. You're lucky if the guns have any bullets, quite frankly, and trying to send it back home. I was there once as well, where we were under attack and had to hide out for 6 hours. And at some point, I saw the UN tanks go down the road, and I thought, oh, good, we're going to be fine. It's safe. And one of my local staff just laughed at me and said, "Oh, all that means is the government won't shoot the kids now." But it's not going to stop them from anything else. And then lastly, last year, when I coming back from an area called Kasai, was famously when the Italian ambassador was murdered, which was all over the news. And a group of ambassadors and I were on the same trip together. And this Italian ambassador decided to stay an extra day to look at some projects that he originally wasn't planning to, but wanted to anyway. And what ended up happening was that he was ambushed and then murdered. What I later found out from I won't name names, but from the UN, it's themselves told me in person that that road is what they call a red road. It's marked red, which means it has to be a tank escort. And they weren't. They were just in normal vehicles, which means for a a few dollars, probably $50, somebody in the UN battalion sold out to a local rebel group to say, we're going to be driving down this road at this time. I've made sure it's not a tank escort. You can come ambush us for a robbery that then went awry. So understandably, the citizens of Eastern Congo are also very reticent of this UN mission and don't know what to make of it, because they clamber up the roads all the time, they block traffic, and you don't see a lot of action. I mean, I will say you don't know what would happen if they would leave, what that vacuum might cause. But that being said, the local population is quite fed up with this mission and being, infested sort of with these UN troops. And in particular, there's a border town called Goma that's on the border of Rwanda and Congo. They get the worst of it. So they regularly protest all the time. And there was another one, I think 2 weeks ago. And then the government came in to disperse it, and they ended up killing 47 people, including, I think, 5 children under 5 just for that. So you can see sort of the powder keg that, unfortunately, the country has to live through. And hopefully, I'm biased, but hopefully Dr. Mukwege does win the election and brings back at least humanity to the chair of the president. That's a long intro, but here we are.
No, I think it's a very insightful discussion, and I would definitely have some questions at the end, particularly focusing on MINUSCO UN mission. But I do see a crisis group report, Darcy, on 30th August, elite troops slaughtered over 50 civilians planning to protest perceived foreign interference in the Eastern DR Congo 3 months ahead of election. Yes. And so that is really dangerous. And I think on 1st September, there was also an appeal to remove the UN mission withdrawal of the mission suggested. So these are the things happening, and we have just heard from you, an eyewitness. Yeah, go ahead, Darcy.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's an excellent point, and that does happen regularly there. And I keep just thinking, at least in Eastern Congo, you look at $1.5 billion, and I'm not saying that sometimes you need that type of security, because you do. That's the reality of the world. But what would $1.5 billion do if that was spent on education and infrastructure? That would probably turn that area around just as much as anything else. I think that's really quite fascinating. And then you have to add in, the final piece is mentioned before, but in particular is the piece of Rwanda. So there is a very troublesome militia rebel group called the M23. Yeah, that are famously funded directly by Rwanda, and they keep denying it. But they regularly come into Goma. At one point, they actually overtook the city, actually twice, and then were beat back. But you can tell that they're funded from Rwanda. Like, the Congolese military sometimes literally don't even have boots. I've spent 12 years in Congo. I've seen a lot of this. And then the M23, these rebel groups, they have the night vision goggles, the latest AR-15s, and it is obvious where this is coming from, but it's denial. And President Kagame is brilliant in using the guilt of the international community for the genocide still to this day to his favor. Sorry, I just had to bring that.
No,
in.
Absolutely. No, this is really, really fascinating discussion. And by any chance, before I invite Gary to the discussion, by any chance, Darcy, did you see any presence of Wagner Group or any Russian mercenaries?
No, I haven't directly personally, but that rumor is there. What happens a lot in that particular area of Eastern Congo is you get a lot of people that are from the Chinese government that shouldn't be there. That is sort of the foreign interest there quite a bit. In fact, I think 2 quote unquote miners from China were recently murdered in the mines as well. But side note, we also work in Syria and the Wagner Group, they're heavily in Syria.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Darcy, for a very comprehensive, I would say, information about the situation in DRC Congo. But I think it is also hopeful that Dr. Mukwege is competing, and he's one of the candidates. And I think DRC has a fair chance in electing him. And he might be the only hope, as we can see from outside. I mean, you have worked there, you know him personally. But I think he's the only hope now to change and transform DRC to one of the stable places in Africa. Gary, thank you so much for waiting patiently. Please come in, and floor is yours to have questions for Darcy.
Well, Darcy has really painted an amazing picture, of a country that's had difficulty over many years. And, for Darcy, when he travels to that country, we always wish him well, because it's a scary place to actually go. So, our thanks, but, always be safe. You mentioned sort of the colonial background, so maybe I'll back you up to that point and say, Belgium had a very significant impact on this area. And recently, there's been some acknowledgement of that in Belgium, in the form of some forms of apology coming, from the royal families there as well. And so that's an interesting development. I don't know that there's been any discussion of reparations, but in the Canadian context and colonialism, one of the first steps is acknowledgement. So there has been some acknowledgement. I think that's correct. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, and actually, thank you for bringing that up, because that raises a very important point. One is something that Dr. Mukwege has taught me is reparations are critical, because without justice, you can't have peace. So you can't cohere a community and country back together without the notion of equitable justice. And the reparations are a part of that if you've been a victim of something. So that's yes, that's one piece. And there was the other, and I'm just trying to remember oh yes, the Belgium, yes, the visit. So the king queen of Belgium actually visited I forget, I think it was in the winter, Pansy Hospital and Dr. Mukwege for an afternoon for that apology tour. They went to Kinshasa, the capital, and then ended up in Eastern Congo. And, since, again, we work at Pansy, and I have a lot of staff, colleagues, and friends there. I speak to them daily. I know that they were getting ready for this one afternoon visit for months. They spent tens of thousands of their own money to, quote unquote, get ready for this royal visit. A week prior to the king coming to Belgium, their Secret Service came in and cleared the roads. So the road from Bukavu in the city into the Pansy is actually a neighborhood outside of Bukavu. It's a slum, but it's named from a neighborhood. The road to there is right through a very precarious slum where the road really pinches, and sometimes you get stuck quite regularly. Somehow, the Secret Service came in and cleared the slum a week prior. I don't know where the people went. No one knows. Just so the vehicles could go down the road safely and quickly. They did the visit. They made the apology. They took the photos. And to this day, they have not given one penny to the hospital or Dr. Mukwege's work. So literally, they are at a financial loss for the visit. They got some nice words out of it and a couple of nice photos, but that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there'll be pressure continuing, but maybe the starting of an opening of a door of the apology, and even in our country, the challenge of reconciliation, is a long road. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where it goes from there. But after the sort of the influence of the Belgians, then we have a lot of mining companies and other extractive industries coming into the country, and so. As I understand it, the DRC is would be considered one of the wealthiest countries in terms of simply resources. Is that sort of correct, that despite the huge poverty of the population, the actual basic industries of the country are quite significant?
That's correct. It's hard to completely quantify it, but there's estimates of it's $1 trillion a year economy if any of that went to the people. But yeah, that is correct. And those borders are very porous. in that area. So again, I've been going for a very long time. I have witnessed myself helicopters coming in, taking minerals and flying out into Rwanda. If you stay in Goma, there's a particular hotel I won't name that's right on the lake that I usually will stay at. As soon as night falls, you hear the boats start up. And that is boats carrying the minerals outside of Congo into Rwanda, and then it gets dispersed throughout the rest of the world. And then it gets dispersed, and what happens is that they take the conflict minerals. The supply chain is very opaque and murky. Some of the quote-unquote good mineral, like the coltan that was mined, ethically in another part of the world, will get mixed into the other supply, and then they can't trace it anymore, and they call it certified. So while there has been progress, like in the U.S. with the Dodd-Frank bill, the supply chain again is still very porous, very opaque.
And some of these minerals that are being extracted now, like coltan and tantalum, are rare minerals that the Congo actually has quite an abundance of relative to the world's supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the ironic part, which has happened exponentially over the last number of years, is that as that goes into our cell phones, that has eventually come back to Congo in the form of cheap pay-as-you-go cell phones. And everybody there has one because it's their whole life. It's their bank, it's the way they know what the crop prices are going to be in the market. It's the phone is their lifeline. But because of that, they're connected to the rest of the world now. And then en masse, they're starting to understand their place in the world. They understand now that, oh my God, my child is literally a slave. I live in a hut. I am attacked once or twice a week from a rebel group. And us in Canada could have our latest iPhone or whatever the case is. And that is causing a lot of issues. It's causing issues for the NGOs and worker people like myself and my staff that used to be kind of untouchable. And that is absolutely gone now.
And so diamonds would probably be another rare mineral, and there's so much work done around the blood diamond concept. Now in corporate world, we're trying to get to sort of environmentally sustainable, governance and goals. Is that at all visible, or is it still just in the hands of, exploitive rebels and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have not seen it progress yet, quite honestly. And without naming names, even a number of years ago, I was asked to testify, and it was a Senate committee hearing, I think, in Ottawa, about quote unquote what can we do about Congo. And since I spent a lot of time there, I was invited to take part. When I brought up I said was, if you're really serious about this, why aren't the mining companies in the room? Why isn't a representative from Banro in the room if you're very serious? And literally the note taker put down her pen and wouldn't put in the minutes. And it's fascinating because obviously a very impoverished place, and then you will see once in a while like a Lamborghini Hummer out of nowhere, and you're like, how did I get there? Oh, that was Banro. They have the money to do anything they want. Oh, new road got built. How'd that happen? Oh, that's just for the mining company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have all these difficulties, but we can hope, in terms of Canadians' ability to impact anything. We are significant in the mining industry, and to some extent, we should be working even locally to try to help environmentally, safe and reasonable procedures, and some disclosure on the corporate level, may be appropriate. And so, Darcy, if we turn to the election now.
Yes.
The question becomes, how broad is the field for parties? So Dr. Mukwege has come forward. How big is the field of politicians that might come forward in this, do you think?
Yeah, there's still time for more to declare. I forget when I think it's early October, sort of the absolute cutoff. And there is a handful. But something really interesting I just heard yesterday that occurred. The only other person that could possibly stand a chance was an old governor and a businessman named Moise Katumbi. And what I've heard yesterday, that he has decided to throw and wait behind Dr. Mukwege. I shouldn't say that officially, because that was a rumor I heard yesterday, and rumors are easy to spread, but that is actually a very good sign, because Moise Katumbi was the only person that could maybe challenge the incumbent Tshisekedi, and if he recognized that I need to throw myself behind the good doctor, that is a decent sign that they might have a chance.
And will the United Nations or other oversight parties be there to help ensure a fair election?
What I do know is that the U.S. Already a year ago, Secretary Blinken did have some meetings about that, and I can't remember if he saw President Tshisekedi. He did meet with Dr. Mukwege. So, in terms of trying to get a credible and fair election, there is some eyes on there. But also, that's a very important distinction that I think should be said publicly, is that someone like the good doctor, he's my hero. He's a literal genius. He's an incredible human being, and he's well regarded around the world. In terms of he's very close with the White House and President Biden for decades, and Macron. He literally will visit the Pope in his office. But there's a difference. We're going to see the difference between we love him as the humanitarian, and now he's a candidate. And behind the scenes, does the West want the Congo to stay corrupt or not because of these minerals? So I think this is going to be really telling to see how this turns out. Because one thing to support somebody like that in their humanitarian work, but behind the scenes, when you're looking at, again, trillions of dollars and the coltan that's needed around the world, will these same powers still react to him the same, or will they want it to stay corrupt? Because Tshisekedi changed very quickly once he got absolute power.
So, these are important discussions to keep the public, even around the world, aware of what's going on in this country, and to, hope and pray for, a democratic outcome, and for the safety of the candidates that, are in that difficult situation. And Kauser, do you want to ask some from there?
No, thank you. I just wanted to build up on Darcy's comment about UN mission. The reason I'm interested in UN mission, because I did take part in Morocco, Western Sahara in 2001 and 2. But just to add with Darcy's comment, the audience, here is a fact sheet that UN publishes. And just I would like to show you the numbers only. As of February 2023, 17,753 personnel are deployed. And it is, with the distribution of 2,970 civilians, and there you can see 12,379 troops. And it's such a large mission. I think this is the largest UN mission.
It is.
In the field, if I'm not wrong, Darcy.
You are correct.
And we have heard from Darcy's own account, the situation has hardly changed, even in the case of security and protection. And I do see the MONUSCO's mandate and what you call the troops contributing nation. The top number comes from India and then Pakistan. So the question is, Darcy, do you think that if, let's say, hypothetically speaking, UN Security Council has decided to withdraw MONUSCO within 6 months, a year, and if the withdrawal of the mission takes place, every hell will break loose there, everything will collapse, people will start fighting again. Do you think that would be the case?
It's difficult to say, but my honest answer, if I had to choose, it would be no. Not because security forces aren't needed. That's not it. And not that I'm arguing against the fact that sometimes, sadly, conflict happens and you need to use deadly force, and that's just the reality of the world, tragically. It's because the base there has gone so low that it is very difficult to inoculate yourself against people that are living with daily survival in the first place. So there's not a lot of negotiation there. So, for example, I spent time in one of the prisons visiting in Bukavu, which, any prison's unpleasant, but I certainly do not recommend spending time in a prison in Congo. And talking to the UN that, quote unquote, was supposed to oversee it. And they said all they were allowed to do is make recommendations. Who was really in control, because I met them, were the gangs inside the prison. And they just laughed. They literally told me, we only think one day ahead. So there's nothing to negotiate with. If the UN goes, whether we're going to fight more or not, it doesn't really matter already, because we literally just take life day by day in the first place. So that's such a low base. I don't think, honestly, it's going to make much of a difference if they get pulled out.
Absolutely. And the reason I pose this question to you is often told to me because I just finished writing a book chapter in our forthcoming book on UN peacekeeping mission being published by Cambridge Scholars Publishing House from Cambridge, UK. And I did argue that four longest serving UN missions, starting from Kashmir to Western Sahara and other two. So I propose that these missions are actually a waste of money, and they have not really achieved any part of their given mandates the way they started. And I think MONUSCO will join in that list as well, because given the sheer number and the resources deployed, nothing substantial was achieved. And one of the counter argument is that missions are stabilizing. They are stabilizing the conflict. They are stabilizing the situation. Otherwise, it will be a hell on the earth, and people will be slaughtered, like the situation in Rwanda. So I just wanted to ask you, because you are the only person coming from the area recently. So thank you very much for the comment, Darcy.
Well, I can give another example of that as well, in terms of sort of the feckless nature of that UN mission. It was another. I've gone so often, I sometimes forget which trip was which. Let's say it was about a year ago, and I returned from a trip from the Congo, and then it was 8 p.m. for me. I started getting messages from my security guy there. So when I'm there, because of my closeness with Dr. Mukwege, and I've been there so much, I'm known. I need a full security team, and still get problems. But so my security guy started messaging, we're under attack, and would send me these. I have these audio clips, and he can hear the gunfire. And he said, "Oh, but the government's going to wait till the morning to counterattack, so there's less collateral damage." And I thought, well, that sounds odd. I know for the fact the government does not care at all about killing their own citizens, sadly. But morning came, they counterattacked, they killed, I think it was 16 of these quote unquote rebels, and then captured the rest and put a big sort of press conference about it. And I got all the videos and photos from it. What it was that it was a local governor connected to the mining industry who was finally caught for corruption bad enough that someone, I believe from the ICC, was coming to take him, or some authority was coming to take him. So he fabricated and paid his own rebel group to attack the city, including writing up their own manifestos and printing up banners, and because I have the manifesto, to attack the city, which triggered the security protocol so that this person couldn't come and grab the governor. And it worked. Where was MONUSCO in any of this? Literally nowhere. So that just goes to show that there is just no level of fear for that type of authority there.
Absolutely. And I think this is such a horrible situation. And I hope if some of the UN folks are listening to our webinar, coincidentally, I don't expect them to listen, but coincidentally, because they're all in New York now, and talking to each other in General Assembly and Security Council in the next couple of days. Mm-hmm. So Darcy, thank you so much. Gary, if you have last words, then I will wrap up this session.
My last words are really just hopeful. I mean, this country has gone through so much difficulty for so long, and there is really human suffering. And you work hard on trauma relief, and Dr. McQuabe works hard on medical practice to help people who've gone through terrible trauma. So our hearts go out to the Congo, and hopefully this election may have a positive outcome, and we pray for the security of all involved.
Thank you, Gary. Darcy, your last words. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no. Thank you for the opportunity. And at the end of the day, things have to become political movements to make real systemic change. But it does have to start from the base, no matter what. All these movements definitely start from the base and then hopefully get up to that political level. So with Make Music Matter, for us, we do find it's critical. The more we can heal the population, get their cognitive functions going back together, have their communities cohere again, get their agency back, hopefully en masse over a generation, this will again create maybe a bit of a middle class and a bulwark against this corruption, where they can honestly just take back their country from the foreign interests.
Thank you, Darcy, for your closing remarks. The audience, we are going to wrap up this session, and before we go, let's thank Darcy. In a way, because he endangers his life so many times living in this one of the dangerous place in the world, and his particular work and his project raised hope to thousands of Congolese over the past decade or so. And Darcy's particular work on trauma recovery, it has been spread in so many countries. So follow Darcy's work in Make Music Matter, and you will find fascinating information about his ongoing projects and his ideas about the impact of music that can change lives. The audience, we have also learned today from Darcy's first-hand experience, very recent trip to DRC, the changes that is being unfolded in the country. And Darcy is a very close friend. Dr. Mukwege is competing as one of the candidates in the presidential election. And like Gary, I also hope that Congo has suffered enough from King Leopold's era down to 2023, I think over a century. So many people lost their lives. Our heart goes out to all the Congolese people. And through this webinar and through this platform, we would like to wish all the best for Dr. Mukwege. And the reason that we wish that he becomes one of the people's president, elected from his own people, and he's going to look after the interest of his own people. And that is how possibly this cycle of violence might end. And also on the final note, UN peacekeeping mission is often perceived as a very big issue on the ground with so much of budget and resources. But it is often not correct that UN missions have really achieved their desired mandates, as you have rightly heard from Darcy Ataman. With these few words, let me once again thank Darcy for coming in this evening with us. And I hope you have learned so many things about this ongoing conflict in Congo. With these words, thank you so much. Stay well and stay safe wherever you are. See you again. Please tune in on Friday morning. We are going to air another two special webinar, one on Bangladesh genocide in the morning, and in the evening, narratives from Palestine. And please do follow peacedays.ca. There are a series of events still happening in this beautiful city of Winnipeg. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.